Hello, my name is Ethan Rivers and this is my persuasive speech for Intro to Human Communications. Here is my audience. Over there, camera lady's there. Alright, let's begin. Clothes. Mostly everybody wears them, but few people really know where their clothes come from. And that's because the clothing industry is massive. The problem that arises from such a large industry is that people in sweatshops in developing countries are working to supply such a massive demand for just pennies a day. And today I want to look at the evolution of cheap labor in sweatshops. So first we have to go back all the way to 1938, when FDR enacted the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now this act gave many rights to workers, such as a minimum wage, compensation for overtime work, and the restriction of child labor. Now, like I said, this gave many rights to the workers, but unfortunately it made companies pay more for labor, and that caused a push to look for cheaper and less regulated labor. And so companies began to move to Southeast Asia. A 2014 article on Sweatshops says China's share of American apparel imports has increased from 9% to 40% in just the last decade. Now what this shows is that companies are searching for cheap, uninspected, unregulated labor. And why are they finding it in Asia? They're finding it in Asia because it is a densely populated area with little to no inspection and little to no workers' rights. And according to a 2015 article by Michael Hobbs, Bangladesh has just 125 labor inspectors to watch out for 75 million workers. Thus, low-priced retailers are taking advantage of a lack of regulation in these developing countries. And now that we've seen some of the history of mass clothing imports, let us observe the effects of cheap labor. Now, the mass movement of retail industry to Southeast Asia has led to many consequences. The International Business Times in 2013 says some of these symptoms are overcrowding, weak regulation of industry, and high demand for product. Western retailers are demanding massive orders to be done in incredibly short amounts of time, and this is causing workers to be put in dangerous situations to meet these demands. So who benefits from this system? The fact is that the retailers in the developed countries are benefiting while the manufacturers are being hurt. According to an NPR podcast in 2016, the top fast fashion retailers grew 9.7% per year over the last 5 years. And this has accumulated to a whopping $1.2 trillion industry. And with so much money coming into this industry, one would assume that some of this money is going to fix the factories and cause upkeep for workers. But this is not the case. According to the International Business Times in 2013, Bangladesh has the worst labor rights record, the worst and lowest wages, and the most dangerous factories in the world. And even worse financially, people are dying because companies will not invest in their factories. And this brings me to April 24th, 2013, when the Rana Plaza, which is a 8-story dilapidated sweatshop in Dhaka, Bangladesh, collapsed. According to the New York Times in 2013, this building housed several factories that left more than 1,100 people dead in the worst disaster in garment industry history. This building should have been condemned by inspectors, but because enforcement is so weak in Bangladesh, it was managed to slip through the cracks and stay open. And inside this building were clothing tags from Walmart, H&M, Disney, and many other popular clothing brands. One of the victims is Mili Khatun. She was 25 years old when the building collapsed, and she was rescued a day later from the rubble. But after being rescued, she was told that her husband, who was also in the building, has died. Many people are victims to sweatshops and cheap labor, and this is just one of the many victims and one of the many cases of disaster. The mass labor migration for cheap, unregulated labor has led to sweatshops and death for thousands. So this is a massive problem in clothing industry. With the rapid increase of production and demand in developing countries, Retailers are thriving off of cheap labor, while workers are without rights and in danger of their lives. The demand for cheap labor by the consumer is through cheap clothing. We demand cheap clothing. And this is the root of the problem, and something needs to change. Thank you. So once again, this is Ethan Rivers with my Persuasive Speech 2. Here's my audience.